what looks like failure was just redirection. And it seemed like so deterrent to the plan, but it was just a detour to the ultimate one.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're good. Huh?
So I'm David.
And I'm Jessica. And we're the Gilmers. And we're crazy. No.
Just a little bit.
The good kind.
I grew up in Charleston. Jessica grew up in Charleston. I moved here in middle school. In 2009 and 10, I was deployed to Afghanistan. And Jessica, at the same time, was a cheerleading coach for a high school cheerleading team in South Carolina. And she had one of my cousins on her team. My aunt got to know Jessica a little bit and got to kind of become friends with Jessica and just learn more about her. And Jessica had just come out of a bad relationship with a guy and had kind of sworn off guys a little bit. So my aunt still decided to kind of introduce her to me. So my aunt pulled up Facebook or MySpace or something like that. I think it was MySpace, actually.
Was
it
Facebook?
Facebook?
It was Facebook.
I thought it might have been MySpace. But pulled up and showed a picture of me from a while back, and
I came across a picture that was just really, really sweet, and I loved it, and I kind of was like, hey, is this the same guy that you were talking about? And she said, yeah, he's in the military, and I went, oh, no, that's not for me. And he said, no, they would just travel too much. And then she was like, well, here's a picture of him in his uniform. And I went, oh, okay. So the rest was history. And I said, within like the same 23 seconds, pretty much sure it was the same breath, I was like, yeah, I'm going to marry him. So he came into town and the rest was history. And, we sat on his grandmother's and his grandfather's porch swing right outside their house. And which is a swing that I'm like, I hope is genuinely will to me. I know we've joked about it before, but I need to confirm that swing's coming here because I'm emotionally attached to it. But we had a couple of conversations on there, and one of those was particularly related to what the future would look like for me. He was 21 and I was 20 at the time, and I don't know what other 21-year-old would have looked at me and said this, but it made me out. That was the same day I said I love you. But he said, oh, okay, well, from a financial perspective, I am going to put X, Y, and Z percentage in a bank account, and should surrogacy work out, should adoption, should whatever we end up having to do for the growth of our family, I'm going to have this much money saved up. And I was like I said, I think I told him that I loved him that day. And that was it. That was all she wrote. And we were long distance for about 2 years or so after that.
We literally, we would Skype in the afternoons. The point that I think even some nights we fell asleep on Skype. We'll wake up when I would wake up with my alarm at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd be like, okay, now
he's still there. I was in school during that time as well, and got into the rhythm of nursing school, and started getting into a little bit, into the actual program itself, and took a final exam one time. The critical thinking stuff wasn't an issue for me. It was these little questions where 2 of the 4 answers were right. One was a little more right than the other. Top 2, that sort of thing. Ultimately, I felt like the Lord was saying, it's not that you don't know this stuff. It's that I don't want you to know it, because this isn't what you're supposed to do. And it was like by the skin of my teeth. And they were things that, like, when I looked back over my test, I was like, I know that's not the question. It was like my answers had changed. And it wasn't even me. It was almost like the Lord had just changed my answers, and it was really strange. And I don't know. It's a story that I may never have like a complete closure about, other than to say, like, looking back at our lives right now, that was not for us. No. At that point, I said, what's the point in me staying here anymore? I'm moving. And I did.
Had you not done that, had that not happened,
had I not failed that test,
would
I don't know.
Have gotten married?
What looked like failure was just redirection. And it seemed like so deterrent to the plan, but it was just a detour to the ultimate one.
Yeah. Just growing in that relationship, and then we got to the point that we were both ready to move forward.
We were on vacation, I think, with my parents in like June or July.
Yep, in Myrtle Beach.
Yeah.
We were staying at a condo in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and I started talking to her dad, Kenny. I just started talking to him, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, I guess I'm going to do this. So I just started talking my intentions with him, and that I love Jessica, and that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her, and just kind of threw it out there like, hey, what do you think about me proposing, like, can I ask Jessica to marry me?
Oh, gosh.
And I was so,
I'm nervous you talking about
I was
this.
so nervous. Like, I don't
9
think
years
I've
later.
ever been that nervous in my life. I don't know what this man's about to tell me. Like, is he about to, like, just tell me no, I'm not
I'm
good
sweating
enough?
for you just
Like-
telling me this story
Like,
because I haven't heard it before.
Well, all I can think is he's going to be like, no, you're not good enough for my daughter. Or no, like, I don't think.
Well, you were on a balcony, so you set yourself
Yeah,
up there. For...
throw me off the balcony, you know. So I'm just so nervous, and he responded so, like, it wasn't even what I expected. He was like, David, I love you as a son. Like,
Oh my gosh!
I couldn't be happier for you to ask for this and everything.
Why are
I
you
can't
gonna cry?
because you're starting to cry. We had our serious talk, and he was like, absolutely, I would love for you to marry my daughter and everything like that. And then we're sitting there, and I got quiet for a second, and then he looked at me and said, but I'm gonna tell you right now, don't bring her back. Don't bring her back. I was like, what? So I waited until September for her birthday, and I threw her a 23rd birthday party. This huge birthday party for your 23rd birthday, and thought that it wasn't gonna, like, she was gonna be
I
surprised
totally
somehow.
caught on.
She knew what was going on because
I had started to catch on, but I was like, I
didn't
don't
think
want to
any-
think
yeah.
too much. What if it's not? Then I'll be disappointed. So
Oh, yeah.
he stands up in the middle of this whole party. We're getting ready to start eating. So he's like, well, we need to bless the food. Hey, David, why don't you bless the food?
I'd already pulled Jessica over near to me so that we could pray together and everything. And I said, before we do that, I had something that I wanted to do real quick, and I then turned to her and got down on one knee, and everybody was all
really
excited and everything.
He said yes, and we were married that May.
Started planning the wedding from Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
We did our whole wedding in Charleston. We kind of like a getaway
Kind of a
vacation,
destination wedding.
wedding.
It's
Yeah.
really it's the best day ever.
It's
I would do it
fantastic.
all over again.
I want to do it again. It's the
too.
best party ever.
It was a really good party. We right around the time we were married, we purchased our very first home, and we had never owned a home. It was this foreclosure, and it was like $120,000, and we found it, and we were like, we had so many ideas and things that we wanted to do and just fix it up and make it our own. Got to that a little quicker than we imagined.
Yep.
When we accidentally flooded the place, and that was our very first flip. And it was actually a really good deterrent from a mental health perspective, because we had some things going on from an emotional perspective in our own growth of our family, and some roadblocks that we'd hit that kind of helped smooth out that time. And it kind of helped us gave our hands something to be doing, so that our minds weren't doing other things and being constantly worried and concerned about the things that we couldn't control. So it was really nice to be able to tangibly use our hands for the things that we could. And I really loved just the outlook that I feel like it kind of instilled in us, because still to this day, 4 houses later, we've
still
renovated, we've done flips and renovations type stuff in every single house. And that first house, we grew our family in that house, and it wasn't an easy process. And in growing our family in that home, and eventually bringing home our firstborn child, our son, to that home, we needed what the flip was going to financially provide. We sold that and made a profit off of it. We were like, we might be on to something, right? Like, this might be something. Yeah, it might be like the whole nursing school fiasco. Was this a disguised blessing that actually is turning into something 100% like a 180 from what we originally thought our lives were going to look like? So about that same time, I think we were kind of like hoping to grow our family, and we had already already disclosed a little bit to David what life was going to look like for us from a fertility standpoint, and what that was going to be. That was going to really entail in regards to a surrogacy journey, or adoption, or both, or neither, or whatever this was going to look like.
Whatever.
Whatever the Lord really brought forth was on a good day, that was okay. On a bad day, that was not the plan. So we battled a lot, but part of the things that was really helpful for me was being able to kind of process a lot of it in writing, and from a journaling perspective, it was therapeutic and helpful to me from the therapy standpoint, to kind of put all of my thoughts and emotions on paper. And so for me, I ended up thinking that, okay, why don't I start a blog? That way we're keeping all of this stuff off of social media.
We wanted to be able to update our families on what we were doing, and our friends and everything. Yeah. There was no intent to reach out to anybody else besides people that we knew and that we loved.
Yep.
So,
but it kind of took off, I think, from there, that all of a sudden we go in a year, 80,000 subscribers on this blog, then we're like, who cares that much? And it was just, I mean, by this time people had shared it on social media, and we were sharing it on social media, and I was like, well, gosh, this is not at all what we kind of anticipated, but this is, I mean, it's fine. We were seeing from an educational standpoint that this was benefiting other people, and it was a blessing. It was benefiting us too, to know that there was, I don't know who you are, but thank you for praying for us. You know, we were genuinely grateful for having no idea who some of these people were, but they were praying for our journey, and that was comforting. And it was this reestablishment of humanity, and like, just, it was really sweet. And throughout the whole thing, we just decided, we were like, well, as well just keep doing this, I guess, and talking about it.
It'd be a way to, you know, just tell our families, you know, this is where we're at, instead of having to call everybody and just let everybody know what was going on.
Yeah.
We just wanted to, you know, Jessica got a lot from doing a blog by, you know, getting her emotions onto paper, and you know, just talking about what it was that was going on and how she felt about it and everything like that.
It really became worth it to me to share and to not hold anything back from that perspective. And so we did. And like I said, 80,000 subscribers. I don't know who in Pakistan is emotionally invested in our journey, but they were, and I'm grateful. It's fine.
There's Pakistan and Africa.
There's everywhere. And I was so grateful for it, and we just kind of thought to ourselves, like, who knows what could come out of this, but let's just keep doing it. So we did, and it was called Our P, Her Pod, and we thought it was really clever. So we kind of started the fertility journey, and documenting all of that on the blog was helpful. And it actually was a family friend of ours at the time who read the blog and was like, I really think I might be good at this. What do you guys think? And like, okay, you know, well, I mean, we don't get the final call. I mean, there's a lot of testing and things involved, and from a surrogacy standpoint, you've got to be an approved surrogate, you've got to have had this, and have had this, and definitely not have ever had this, and it just, there's a lot of like really specific things. They would prefer you not have had a C-section, and if you did, there's a scar tissue kind of examination where they go through. There's just so many moving pieces, and we thought, well, we're not going to get attached to this idea just in case something happens, and this is not what ends up happening. You know, we don't want to get too attached. So we did, we had a couple of people reach out, but one of them was a little bit more serious. And so we started the process and turned in OBGYN paperwork and kind of went through the route of doing all of it and getting this initial approval. And we were like, oh, okay, this might actually happen. We're doing this. So we set sail on that journey and started the egg retrieval process. Throughout the egg retrieval process, found out that my ovaries function, and they function like an overkill. It's a little bit much. It was like an aha moment, because we thought, okay, this is going to give us a lot of options in regards to trying to grow our family from a biological standpoint, or at least we thought. We wanted to have 1 or 2 frozen embryos to maybe try to do a fresh transfer or a frozen transfer with a gestational carrier whom would have been approved by this time. And we said, okay, so we'll do a transfer of those 1 or 2 embryos, and we'll hope for our best, and it'll be the best shot. Everything's gonna be great. And then we ended up, they said, with 1 or 2 eggs or healthy embryos, that's gonna really probably be more like 5 or 6 healthy eggs. And then outside of those 5 or 6 healthy eggs, before that, they'll probably look like 15 to 20 healthy follicles. We were like, okay, great. And they said, but because you over-ovulate, we're going to give you this medication, and it's going to help keep you from over-ovulating too much to an unhealthy standpoint, where you end up having like 15 babies or something crazy. And we were like, oh gosh, yeah, we definitely don't want that. You know, we would love to have a big family and that many if that's what God gave, but like, we don't want to be conflictual, like from a conflict standpoint. We don't want to be spiritually and ethically conflicting, making decisions over what are we going to do with the rest of these babies, that just not be some sort of pull for our hearts. And so we prayed long and hard about that and thought, okay, this is what we're going to do. So we ultimately took the medication, and it made me extremely sick. And so I took it as much as I physically could possibly do while withholding a job and life, and just as I possibly could, and maintain a lifestyle. And so I did. We got 46 follicles, which it was
46 follicles.
3 times the amount of what they really wanted. 3 times the amount at 46 follicles. It would dwindle down to like 27 healthy eggs. And then out of those healthy eggs, they were like, what do you guys want to do? Do you want it? We said, do not, please do not make 27 babies. We want what the Lord wants. Put them in a petri dish, and let's just see what happens. We're going to let God do the rest. We're going to let God do this. And so we did. We got 13 babies.
They graded those embryos, and
some of them stopped developing. There was like some sections of like over the course of 5 days that they would stop developing, and one day we got a phone call and I had been stressed out. David had kind of stayed home from work that day because we were anticipating the phone call of what that would look like. And I was like, oh my gosh, if something doesn't if it didn't happen, like I don't want to be by myself here when that call happens. It, you know, would be like the worst news ever. So he took the day off and he sat home with me and we got a phone call.
Just wanted to give you an update. Things have been going really well. Today I froze 5 of the embryos.
Okay.
Okay. We've had one that has stopped developing.
Okay.
And there are 2 others that I'll continue to watch. And there's a possibility I might be able to freeze one of them tomorrow.
Okay.
And I'll give you an update when that, tomorrow. But I just figured we hadn't been in touch with you for a while, so I'd give you a call, let you know things are going really well.
Oh my God, you're going to make me cry. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And I'll just give you an update tomorrow on these last 2, what went on. But the 5 today are really nice embryos and ready to be stored. So
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, you too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh my God.
You just stop worrying.
So when we initially set out on that very first surrogacy attempt, we're overlooking what seems to be a plethora of an embryo bank. And our fertility clinic sat us down and explained that fertility was certainly not our issue. And having had such incredible egg quality and incredible sperm quality, that ultimately that's what kind of resulted in this incredible embryo quality. And without attempting to give us any false hope of any kind, they assured us that these types of numbers usually happen to people who, upon being able to conceive would have carried twins twice and possibly, without trying. But they said, here at a fertility clinic, we try not to offer a lot of false hope, but fertility is not y'all's issue at all. It's just your inability to carry. So we're feeling like we're sitting on top of this mountaintop. We've got these 5 embryos. We're 23 and 24 at egg retrieval. And, our ages we were honestly discouraged from doing any sort of genetic testing on them to check for abnormalities prior to transfer. And while we were grateful to save a couple $1,000s, we were also grateful that the medical team supported that too, because we felt like the Lord was calling us into a direction of not doing that testing anyways. Finding out that the embryos were abnormal or that there was some reason for genetic concern would have ultimately just made it an ethical issue for ourselves as to, what we were supposed to do with these abnormal embryos now. So, if our embryo would have come back and tested positive for Down syndrome, we still would have implanted them. Our child with Down syndrome would have been just as loved and valued, and we would have strived to have given it the best quality of life that all of our children have. And we believe that life begins at that moment of conception, and therefore, by textbook, they might be embryos, but to us, by our faith, these are our babies. If you can stretch out its chromosomal DNA and find out if it's a girl or a boy, find out if it's normal or abnormal, find out if it's got freckles, then it's not a ball of cells, that's a baby. So looking at these 5 beautiful embryos, we decided that we were going to implant the first time, just to give us the best of the best chances right out the gate. We were going to put 2 in and hope that at least one of those would take. So putting 2 in that first time, we had 3 remaining at this point, and we implanted those 2 in April of 2014, which would have given them a due date of early January. And we found out through blood work that it was not leading to a healthy and viable pregnancy, and ultimately showing that her body was miscarrying these embryos, and both of them, in fact. So we said goodbye to those babies, and knowing that they didn't have to necessarily, be this factor to point a finger, or there wasn't anything necessarily to blame, that sometimes it just doesn't happen the first time. We looked at our embryo bank and felt pretty encouraged pretty quickly to start the next round. You go into this process expecting that sometimes it just might not work the first time. And so we were ready to jump back into it, and we did. We waited on some healing and for her, all the medication and everything. And then in July of 2014, we decided that we would only implant 1 this time. And upon her first blood work, her numbers that were supposed to be within 25 to 125 came back, and they were almost 500 the morning of her very first blood work. So at roughly 4 weeks gestation, numbers like that obviously lead to the discussion of multiples pretty quick. Our doctor called and said that the embryo had split into identical twins. So here we are kind of thinking that it's going to be this full redemptive story, and that this time was going to be different. There is a stream of continuous blood work over the course of a couple of weeks after transfer that either prove pregnancy or they don't. We got that proof of pregnancy pretty quick with the positive test at home even too, and only to find out at another routine blood work later on that her numbers were declining. Having already told family and gotten them all excited, that we were expecting, we made phone calls that were pretty difficult, and having to let family know that we were miscarrying these sets of twins as well. And I remember calling a close family friend, and I was literally sobbing on the phone with her, just wondering where in the world God was taking us and questioning why this wasn't working. And without asking if she could pray for me or with me or anything, she just started praying. And she said, Lord, if it is your will, breathe your breath into their lungs. We once again said goodbye to another set of dreams. We considered selling everything, doing missionary work, whatever God obviously had for us. It might not have been around a big family and having children. And we wanted to trust that with everything that we had, but some days didn't lead to that. It's been 8 or 9 years now, and met a friend for coffee recently, and she kind of asked me how that grief process went for us. And, in a similar situation, I think she was hoping for a beacon of light at that point. And I was thankful that I was able to provide that. And I told her, I said, as a parent, I hope that all of my children end up right where these babies are. And, I told her, I was honest. I said it still takes time and counseling, and not every day is as good as the day, that I was talking to her. But I said, grief definitely doesn't happen overnight. And eventually, we got to a point where we took comfort in knowing that our children opened their eyes for the very first time and saw the face of Jesus and not ours. And I meant what I said, but I told her that if I were to have tea with Jesus and he offered them back to me, that I would tell him no. And that I would want all 4 of my children to stay in heaven with him, walking those streets of gold, because as a parent, that's where we hope all of them end up. And how could we selfishly prefer that they'd be opening their eyes for the first time and seeing our faces, our imperfect faces, our in need of a Savior faces, and they get to rest peacefully in his arms right now? How could I want any different for them? So at this point, we had 4 angel babies just dancing at the feet of Jesus and hopeful that we'll see their faces and stuff one day. We have these 2 remaining embryos. We're just going to hang tight to them for a little while.
And all this whole time, Jessica's still blogging about all this, and using it as an outlet for her to get her emotions on paper and understand. But also, the blog was growing and taking off in ways that we had never imagined. And
so, of course, anytime you do something like this and you're on social media, and there's always going to be somebody who just doesn't agree with you. There's always going to be the loud people that you just, sometimes it's water off a duck's back, their comments, and sometimes they just hit home and they just stick. There's a lot of that thing that makes it a little nervous to do and open up in the way that we are right now, and it makes it really difficult. But we're grateful that we did it, because it solidified why we were doing this and what we were doing, and how the Lord was going to take what I thought was to keep it off social media, utilize social media, and then make it that much bigger for his glory. And we had 2 people that wrote us, and 2 different occasions, and said, I have an abortion set for Saturday or for Monday, and it'll be the Thursday prior or something. And my sister's mail lady's dog groomer, well, I'm being facetious, but it would be some up the channel line of just what their process, how they found out about our blog. And they found out about it and they read it, and all of a sudden they'd have this new found appreciation for the life that they were carrying. And it was, maybe an unplanned pregnancy. And ultimately they would write us and they would say, I'm choosing life for my child because I read this.
And then to see the beauty come out of this, of something that, God had just asked us to do, that it wasn't our intentions. We had no clue where it was going to go. And then to see something like that happen, it was just, I don't know,
to see him kind of take something that we thought was ash and make a new flame with it. We don't know what happened with these children and where those babies might be at today, but it was no longer a thought and no longer a traumatic perspective for her, because we opted into sharing our story. And I thought, the Lord has been given such glory through this, and ultimately it's led us to our babies today. even they wouldn't have found their way to us and found their way home had we not been willing to share that journey. And so it was very vulnerable, very very hard and difficult to talk about at some points, but yeah, it was beautiful. I was extremely almost embarrassed, like to the point of embarrassment, because we had done so many fundraising efforts and had nothing to show for it, right? People were never gonna like give to something that this might not be for you, you know. Like there was this like move and feeling and emotion surrounding, why are you it almost felt like we were trying too hard, and it was this it was kind of embarrassing
and
yeah.
I mean,
discouraging,
yeah,
maybe.
and then the people that would reach out and have ugly things to say about the blog, like,
Yeah.
why are you sharing all this with everybody on the internet? And it kind of got to us like, you know, are these people right? Why are we sharing this if you know, we're not seeing any fruit from this? You know, why are we doing this, and what's going on here?
Part of me was starting to like really backtrack a lot with the blog, you know, and from a fundraising perspective, we were doing the same thing, and we were just trying not to backtrack too much, but also really feeling ourselves slip down that slippery spiral. And so I sat on it for about 3 days, and I just felt like the Lord was saying, you need to just post this. And so I noticed that there were some new neighbors moving in next door, and I thought, I'm going to go help them, like introduce myself and go maybe see if I can help move in or whatever. And I just thought, well, I'll do this, and then I'll just leave it, I'll publish it, and I'll walk away from it, you know. Took my phone with me, but decided I was just gonna publish it and walk away. So I published it, and about 30 minutes later,
the phone rings.
The phone rings, like, out of nowhere.